Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, you name it, across the world of crypto, blockchain, all around the world. And today I have another amazing guest. I'm looking forward to this interview. I know this man's first name, but it's not his last name. It doesn't matter. His name is Johnny. He is one of the co-founders and lead developer at Empyreal. Johnny, welcome to the show today.
Hey, great to be here.
Thank you for being here. So let me ask you first. I kick things off with the same question for everybody, but I get lovely and all kinds of different, diverse answers. Um, what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think so. So I come from an engineering background, and I've worked in kind of Web3 development and backend and data for about 15 years now. So this is sort of just a logical progression for me to kind of move into tooling for Web3. And so I can talk a bit more about kind of how I kind of got to where I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I was first kind of exposed to blockchain pretty early, like around like 2011, actually, when somebody kind of showed me Bitcoin, and I didn't really understand what it was. I think that like that early, I don't think anyone really did. It was this sort of weird hacker money, where like people would talk about things like the Silk Road. And the first time I remember someone showed it to me, Bitcoin was maybe like $10. And then when I saw it go from $10 to like it was like 120, it was like sort of first big push. That got me interested just in the sense that like, okay, this feels like this is gaining traction, and it seems like something worth studying. And so kind of coming from an engineering background, I started to kind of dig into the underlying tech. And there wasn't so much you could do back then. It was really you could participate by, buying a GPU and mining, or you could just kind of try to like study and understand the potential of it. And so there was a lot of like sort of experimentation, but it wasn't something where you would really think. I think the people that really like went full crypto that early were really brave and kind of just very like they were willing to kind of explore this technology. And for me, it was just something that I used sort of as a way to kind of improve my systems programming and my understanding of cryptography. And then over time, you started to see kind of some interesting applications come out. Like I remember Counterparty, and there was like a lot of these kind of different proof of work chains. But it wasn't really till Solidity came out that I got interested as a developer in a bigger way, because Consensus started the Consensus Academy, which was sort of like this first cohort of Solidity developers. And so what they wanted to do is like onboard people, do this class where they would teach you kind of how to write smart contracts. And it was a lot different back then. There was sort of a different mentality in how you approached it, but it gave me this sort of exposure. And that kind of kickstarted my interest, kind of moving into different sort of smart contract platforms. Like I was pretty interested in the work that was being done by the teams like Tezos, and just sort of different virtual machine implementations. But over time, I kind of ended up gravitating back towards sort of the EVM as what I felt was like the most important technology for developing smart contracts and building in the space. And so I kind of had a pretty cool journey where I spent some time working on chains like Solana and Tezos, but ended up kind of finding my way back to Solidity development. And then so through all that, I also worked a lot in systems programming and data. And so I think that there's like this really interesting intersection where I found that building for Web3, it initially was this idea of trying to put everything as like a DAO and decentralized on chain. But I think we're starting to see people move towards more of this hybridized approach where you have these off-chain and on-chain components that work together. And so when we were starting Imperial, for me, I was looking at an interesting way to kind of build in the space that really focused on approaching things from sort of a DeFi first perspective, but I was always trying to work on the infrastructure side. And that's sort of how this project came together, was it was a way for us to be firmly placed in the DeFi community, but focused more on infrastructure development.
Very cool. Very cool. So that brings us to today. Empyreal. I want to keep saying Empyreal because it's spelled that way, but Empyreal. What is Empyreal SDK? All about what makes you unique from a technological development standpoint.
Yeah, so I think I like one of the biggest challenges I think in Web3 right now is that we have a lot of sort of peer PvP style trading. And part of the reason for that is I think that we struggle to onboard more users. So we're competing for market share of a smaller user base. And I think that a lot of the onboarding friction comes from things like the complexity of learning protocols. Like one of my consistent thoughts is if it's hard for me to understand as a Solidity dev, it's going to be very hard for a standard user to understand. And a lot of protocols, they're really powerful once you learn how to use them, but there's this very sharp learning curve. And so I think we started to see this narrative of like intents, this idea of not focusing so much on directly using a protocol, but being able to say how you want your funds to be allocated or the outcome you're looking for, and then allowing uh, tooling to kind of solve the problem for you. And at the same time, I think also with account abstraction, we have ways of making wallets simpler to use. I think a lot of people that interact with Web3 applications every day have gotten very comfortable with this concept of having a browser integration. So having like a MetaMask or some sort of web wallet and managing a private key, bridging funds between networks, and kind of just like juggling a lot of complexity that feels like pretty natural, I think, after you've been doing it for a while. But for a new user, I think a lot of people just they immediately get discouraged by this complexity, and they are uncomfortable with things like maintaining the security of their assets. And so they're looking for kind of a simpler way to participate in Web3. But at the same time, I think we can give them a pretty complete experience. And so what we want to accomplish is easier onboarding and simplified interactions with Web3, so that we can onboard more users and create more exciting use cases.
Everybody's goal is to onboard.
Yeah, I think we all have to be evangelists, right? I think that everybody's number one job in Web3 is evangelist first, and then secondly is whatever else you're doing.
That's a good way to put it. I like that approach. So I want to ask you, like, how we build an intelligent infrastructure for Web3, and part of it is account abstraction, right? Part of it is intents. How do we build it out, though?
Well, yeah, I think like one of the things that I'm pretty lucky to be working on a project like this is that in Web3, you have a lot more freedom for experimentation and exploration than you might if you were pursuing a startup with kind of traditional funding via VC, where you kind of have a lot more pressure on you to produce in a shorter period of time. I think with Web3 development, there's a better grasp from the community on the the needs for being experimental and explorative. But so I think what that has led to for us is it's afforded us the ability to really figure out the best way for us to solve the problem for ourselves. And so when we're working on development for this, a lot of times what we're looking for is trying to discover the best path to develop applications for ourselves so that we can share that learning with other developers. And so I think that there's a lot of complexity right now, and there's like, a lot of these things are kind of newer concepts. So what we're trying to do is figure out a really effective way to build this type of tooling so that we can share it with more developers.
So you're building it. I like the flexibility. I like the freedom. I like that concept. We still, from my perspective, I still see that people in the Web2 world are not giving the proper cred to Web3 builders, right? And I want to see how we can flip that switch and empower this next generation who is going to be Web3 builders to, be be respected and have that credit.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because I think that there's a lot of people that were very aggressive naysayers, but I don't think it's because they didn't believe in the technology. I think it's they were rooting against it. I think when you start to see Web3 catching on and it's disruptive to the work you're doing, you start to feel like I can imagine that some people in kind of Web2 looked at it and said, "Oh, it's a fad. We don't need to start to adapt to integrate this into our workflows and kind of rethink our entire business model." And I think it's harder to hold that stance every day, as we start to see these massive benefits that are provided by decentralized technology. I think like one example is when you look at programmable money, just as like a very basic concept. If you're building applications that have financial rails, if you're not working with Web3, you have to build a relationship with a payment processor. You have to have this sort of higher fee structure. There's a lot of regulation around how money can be transferred. There's a higher latency. And I think that you can just provide a generally better user experience when you are working with Web3 for a lot of these concepts. And so I think as we start to kind of figure out regulation, because I think that's probably one of the biggest inhibitors was large companies were scared to kind of dip their toe in the water of Web3 because they just were, scared of like, what if regulators come after us for working with this technology? And I think that we're starting to get to a point now where big companies feel much more comfortable, exploring this space. And so I just think over time, it seems pretty clear to me that this is a better way to manage just like a large percentage of your development stack.
So I want to talk about development stacks. Well, actually, you know, you worked on three different platforms. You said you worked on EVM, you worked on Solana, you worked
Mhm.
with those. Tezos was great for NFTs. I'm not going to dispute that, and I like some of my NFTs on Tezos.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but you have this war. I would say it a war, but if you're an outsider looking at social media between
Yeah.
and Ethereum, what's going to win? Why and why is it easy? Why'd you pick Ethereum, and what are the considerations, and why should other people pick Solana? What's the pros and cons?
Yeah, I think I don't think there has to be just one blockchain or just one sort of paradigm for development. I think that when you look at things even like you have like Aptos and Sui with the Move VM, and you have Solana and Ethereum and like all these different VMs, they all have trade-offs. And so obviously when you have like the lower latency with chains like I mean Ton is another example I look at with Ton, Solana, and I think we're starting to see some EVM based chains that are going to have that very low latency and kind of asynchronous processing like Monad. I think that there are use cases for that as well. I think it really just kind of depends on your goals for your application. One thing that found really interesting about Tezos, I know people don't talk about it a lot, but what it was really good for me in terms of learning was they have a really high focus on like formal verification. And so when they built their virtual machine, their focus was on making it easy to mathematically verify the logic of your smart contracts. And they felt that that would be a really good value proposal to developers, which didn't catch on in the way they had hoped. But I think that a lot of really good research was done by them as a team and as a chain. And they might actually, there might be a time when that actually becomes the bigger priority. I think what we're at right now is that we want to have really flexible development that's effective. And so for me, I see the EVM community, especially in DeFi, as having a really strong open source community, a really good auditing community. There's a lot of like very good auditors in the space. And so I think that if you are trying to build a more complicated application, there's a lot of benefits to building on an EVM just because there's a lot more code to kind of use as a foundation for your development. But I think in the same way, chains like Solana, which they're building, as like a virtual machine that supports, Rust development. And so you can kind of have the tool chain of a Rust developer at your disposal. That also has its benefits, but I think that right now there's less of an open source community around Solana development than there is in the EVM. So it's just, I think, something where you're doing a lot more trailblazing if you're building for Solana than you are for EVMs. But like I said, I think it's the trade-offs around sort of like latency and decentralization are really sort of big things to weigh into.
Got it. So I'm curious. I've interviewed people before, really, really, really tech savvy like you, who are creating SDK toolkits, right? And there's always been a different mix of variety of what the toolkit is for the developer. Say I'm a developer, I want to have this, I want to have access to the toolkit so I can mix and match and I can, have interoperability between chains. What should be in my ideal SDK toolkit?
Yeah, so for us, what we wanted to focus on was um, what I would say is sort of like the core kind of tooling that a user would want at their disposal. So we've been working on a platform called Simulacrum. And so what it's doing is it's abstracting interactions with common functionalities on chain. So right now, what we're focusing on are swaps, perpetuals, um, ENS tooling, so being able to have the abstraction on your wallet address, account abstraction, and uh, a few other things that we're kind of packaging together to make it this very simplified experience that we can build on top of. And so that's enabling us to integrate with different sort of rails. So one of the things that we've been focusing on now is trying to demonstrate to people the ability to connect off-chain sources with this on-chain framework. And so Twitter is sort of, or X is where we kind of decided to target for our first demonstration of that capability. So being able to connect your X account to a wallet and have your X account manage your crypto holdings. But it's more about demonstrating this as a specific source that can tap into this framework. So building in like a modular sense where you don't really have the source connecting to the logic allows you to have a variety of sources that connect to the underlying intents platform. And so building this way, what we're really trying to focus on is building a framework that works for us, that's complete enough that you can build a wide variety of applications and also extend it. Because I think that it's hard to predict what the next use case is going to be. So we really wanted to build in a way that's flexible and scalable. And I also think that we want to make sure that we can tackle user onboarding in an extremely low friction way. So I think that some people, there's different sort of users that you can target. And I think there's like a lot of great applications that what they're targeting are high frequency traders, people looking for like this like really rapid edge to make um, the best trade possible with the lowest latency. And there's definitely a big market for that. But I think there's also an even bigger market for users that aren't looking for this like extremely competitive trading experience, but they're looking for maybe stable yield, some crypto exposure, and some kind of swim lane experience where they're not um, really able to make the kind of mistakes that they're afraid of making. So by simplifying the Web3 experience, by giving them, this kind of overlay of the blockchain that really exposes safe applications, we think that that's like a really important way to onboard users. And so this is something that we're sort of building as a toolkit for ourselves. So we're dogfooding our toolkit ourselves, and then we hope to open it up to other users. But we think it's very important as we're building to make sure that we're the first customer so that we're building something that we are using.
I like the X platform usage from a efficiency standpoint, and I like it that way.
Mhm.
Question for you though. This is my concern.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Say I post something on Twitter or on X and say like Dogecoin sucks, you know, and Elon sees that and he puts me in X prison for a week. How do I
Mhm.
act my crypto if I want to get rid of it, like, or I want to sell it or sell it by
Yeah,
how do I do that without being censored?
yeah, yeah. So the goal of this really, like, what we wanted to demonstrate with this initial use case was more so that you can have a wallet tied to an X account and you can actually make actions with it. But yeah, like obviously that's not going to be the most secure in the sense that you don't have full autonomy over that X wallet. But it does open some really interesting things such as tipping and airdropping. So being able to send uh, a token to an X user and they can move that off of their like socially visible wallet into a wallet that's not linked to the platform. It's just a rail that kind of connects this Web2 experience to a Web3 experience. But I think that it doesn't have to be firmly tied to that. And so I think that once you have a user that's onboarded their X wallet via Simulacrum, which the onboarding is I don't love using that phrase because it's the wallet is already developed, like you already have a wallet assigned to every user based on their user ID. It's a deterministically generated wallet per user. But what you are able to do is if someone does send you a tip or a transaction to that wallet, what we're working on next is the ability to integrate passkeys with that wallet. So now you have an alternative authentication mechanism for your socially linked wallet that doesn't tie you directly to X as a platform. But I think that when I like envisioned this as a platform, one thing that was really important to me was that you had to have a trust minimized control over that wallet that would not rely on these other channels. And so what I mean by that is by creating an oracle for a user to broadcast an intent on Twitter, they're able to have this non-permissioned way to have some base interactions with that wallet. But we want to be able to facilitate users migrating away from like this tight connection to Twitter as like the as your controller. And so I would just describe this as like a low friction onboarding that can kind of function as a stepping stone to get people to a more traditional Web3 experience. Because I think anyone that's worked in tech knows onboarding is when you lose users, and onboarding it like the what I mean by that is that you often if something takes an extra, you know, 500 milliseconds to load, that will have a significant impact on the amount of users that you onboard. So it's like very touchy. Just getting someone to come to your website is is like not even half the battle because you have to get them through this onboarding process. So if we can have an onboarding process where you're actually already onboarded just by owning a Twitter account, and then if you do want to take that more seriously and start to transition to um, you know, greater custody of that wallet, we want to make that an easy process for the user.
I like it. I like it. My next question, I guess my next this ties into my next question, right? Um, is overall the best way to democratize access to Web3, I guess besides easier onboarding, like what's
Yeah.
the because you mentioned regulation, you mentioned different things, right? How do you get them here in a democratic way? How do you democratize it?
I think you have to give people good experiences. Like that's one of the things that I worry about with, for example, this cycle has been very meme focused, right? And I think when you read the data, there's people that do terrifically well on memes, but I think this cycle has been very aggressive meme trading. And so I think there are users that come into this thinking, oh, this is a thriving ecosystem. I'm going to be successful. And they underestimate how competitive these meme marketplaces trading is. And so they might not have the best experience and it might actually discourage them. So we kind of have this false start for onboarding a new Web3 user. And so in that regard, I don't think that we want to focus and then maybe this is a sin to say in Web3, but we don't want to focus on get rich quick style experiences. I think we want to focus on showing people that there are other opportunities in Web3. I think that stable yield is one of the things that is not tapped into enough by people that are exploring Web3, where you can actually get, there's people that buy Ethereum and hold it, right? And to me, that's crazy when we have liquid staking and restaking and all these opportunities to get compounding yield on your position. And so I think that if we can start to make it easier for people to see, I can get yield not only on ETH, but I can get yield on stables. I can actually have a better interest rate than any bank, or for the most part, a standard sort of index fund would provide. I think that's a really powerful opportunity for onboarding a new wave of users.
I like it. I've always liked the fact that you can get more return than a bank.
Yeah, I mean the point whatever 2% annually. I think it's a very easy value proposition to tell somebody what is, do you have your funds in a CD or a bank right now? If we can make it secure enough that they feel comfortable, we can provide a better experience to people outside of just high risk investments. And I think that there's a lot of projects that are doing like a great job in sort of building this style of investment for users. I think we just have to find a way to meet users where they are, and we have to earn their trust. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that we have to provide a safe, secure experience. And I think that we're going to start to see protocols that focus on things like insurance and risk management. And I think that there'll be a bigger narrative as we onboard a wider amount of maybe less risk tolerant users.
Yeah, I agree. So you talked about the cycles, and I'll tell you what I liked about each of them. I like the ICO days. I was an advisor during the ICO days, and I like the fact that you don't need a VC anymore. You know, during the NFTs, I started my podcast during the NFT start.
Yeah.
And I like to see an artist who never made money before in their life make money. That was cool. Then you had the SEC come along and go after everybody, except they didn't go after the meme coin people. And the message out there is, oh, it's okay to use crypto for meme coin gambling, but not anything else. How
Yeah.
do you break down that challenge? I didn't like the meme coins. I'm not a great meme coin guy. But how do you clear a path there? Say, okay, it's so much more than just meme coin gambling.
Yeah, I think that's a hard problem, because there's there's a stigma for sure. And I think it's something that creates a lot more volume. And I mean, I think that when you look at what's happening in Web3 right now, I don't have the data in front of me, but from looking at Dune dashboards, a significant percentage of our volume is what you might consider wash trading on meme coins, right? So how do we get away from that? Or maybe we don't need to get away from it. Maybe we just need to expand kind of the purview of Web3 a bit beyond that. But yeah, I think that, like I said, I think that it's going to come down to having a clean onboarding experience and a very secure, secure platforms that are designed for less than expert crypto users. And I think that there's a lot of people that are looking for this. I think that, when you talk to, I mean, I'm sure whenever you go out and you socialize with people outside of Web3, they're always asking you for advice on how to get involved in it, right? Like, I think that people are really curious, but they're just scared of losing money, and, which is a totally reasonable thing to be worried about. And so that's sort of what I think is going to be kind of the next wave, is this more kind of handheld experience where we can kind of bring people onto these platforms and give them a better kind of Web3 investment.
I agree. Yeah, I'll be honest. Most of the people I talk to who are not in Web3, who want advice, I tell you, learn, buy on Coinbase, Kraken, or Gemini, and learn about Bitcoin and Ethereum before you do anything else.
Yeah.
And then when you have any questions after you do that, then come back to me. They never come back. So,
Yeah, well, and I think that's like, I mean, it's fair, not everybody wants to go and read Satoshi's white paper and then learn what a virtual machine is. And I mean, it's a lot of knowledge to take in. I think that it all comes down to credibility. I think if you can go and you can present a platform that works well, has an awesome user experience, and earns people's trust just through I don't know. There's something really weird in terms of perception where it's hard to quantify why a person feels comfortable with one platform or another. You just kind of have to iterate and figure out what can you do to kind of give the best experience to one user. You pick a user profile and you satisfy that one user, and then a lot of times that will scale to more users like them. And so I think that that's kind of the approach that I want to take with this is identifying users that might have non-traditional profiles for Web3 and building something that they love, and then seeing if we can continue to onboard more people like them.
see, I like that, and I get fully behind that. I like it a lot. So,
Yeah.
Awesome. So I do want to thank you very much for coming on the show today, for speaking with me. I enjoyed speaking with you. I look forward to see what Imperial's up to and what great things you're about to accomplish. And I have one last question.
Yep.
It's how can people find out more information about Imperial, about you? How can they do that? How can they become users or clients on your platform? How can they do that?
So first and foremost, I would say come through our Twitter and check out our Telegram. Telegram's where we're most active, and we're currently actively beta testing Simulacrum. And if you're interested in becoming a beta tester or just want to learn more, come through our chat. We're all very active as a team in there, and I think that right now the most valuable thing to us is getting feedback from real users. So I think the more beta testers we can work with, and the more opinionated people that come through, and I would say all kinds of opinions. I think that sometimes people are scared to come in and say like, "Oh, I don't like this for this, this, and that." But that's actually the best feedback we can get is, just people patting us on the back doesn't do a lot for us to improve our product. But when someone comes in and says, "I don't like this for these reasons," it's something we take very seriously, because it's like, okay, this person has this perception for a reason. And so let's try to understand what we can do to, alleviate that. Or maybe we just have to understand that there are certain user profiles that are never going to like the work we're doing. And so it helps us to kind of understand, okay, so these are the types of users we shouldn't be targeting for these reasons. So yeah, anyways, I would say if you're interested in having, uh, passionate conversations about intents and account abstraction, I want to talk to you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.